Hello, and welcome to the podcast of Emmanuel Assemblies of God in Knoxville, Tennessee. We're so glad you've taken the time to listen. If you're ever in our area, we invite you to join us for one of our worship services. For times and locations, please visit at emmanuelag.com.
All right, hope you enjoyed that. And I would say thank you, Pastor, for having us here. And thank you, Rick, for not saying anything that, there you go. So we're gonna show a few slides, and then I'm gonna get into some things, a message that I wanna give you this morning. So there we go. Okay, so that's our AI version. It doesn't look anything like us, so I made sure they weren't looking at us, okay? But that's our AI version. And so, yes, we are missionaries going to Cambodia. It's on our first term, and so in our 50s, so it's an interesting ride. I'm going to show you where Cambodia is at, okay? So a lot of people don't know where Cambodia is at, and some people have even said you're going to Colombia, you're going to have to learn to speak Spanish or whatever. No, not even in the same ballpark. Khmer is not. It's just not even Spanish. Spanish looks easy. So anyway, but as you can tell, up in Cambodia is this area it's sandwiched between Thailand, Vietnam, and Laos. And it does have beaches. Somebody said something about, Rick, you said something about Florida. It's southern Florida weather, and it has beaches. So, I mean, if you want to retire, come on over. We'll put you to work. But we're going to be in Phnom Penh, and which is the capital city, and as you can see right there, and I put this map up here because this is China in relation to Cambodia, and it kind of shows you the difference in the size, but also the proximity, so you get an idea where Cambodia is at. Okay, so I want to show you a couple things. I'm going to have Rodna kind of tell you a little bit about what we're doing. I put two pictures up here because I think these are two major, there's a lot of things about Cambodia. They've got a very varied history. They have some really rough times, and they've got a very long history. There's been times they've had a very powerful empire in that area, very wealthy kings, technologically advanced, and then there's been times that they've just about been wiped out by their own people even. So let me show you a couple things that you need to know about Cambodia. One is on the left. There's a lot of shots I could have taken, but I thought, I don't know what to put in here, so I'll put this. This is in a complex that's a Buddhist temple complex. So this is just one of the buildings on that complex, but I just put it there to let you know, they are 95% Buddhist. Southeast Asia is the Buddhist capital of the world. It's the most concentrated area. The only place that has a higher concentration of Buddhism, I can't say the only place, but the only place in the nations around is like Thailand. Thailand would be like 99% Buddhist. With that said, 98% of the population are unreached. So there's only like 2% Christian, and I would venture to say that 2% is a little high. Is a religious free society where anybody, but the state religion is Buddhism. But you can come over. You just got to know that it is a Buddhist country. The festivals, the holidays, all of those things, even the thinking is Buddhist. Okay. Now the one on the right is a little different. You go, what's that? I could have showed you a whole lot of things. Some things that would have brought it to home more would have been something I was concerned with if there would be children in here. But this right here is a monument, and it says, "Never will we forget the crimes committed during the democratic Kampuchea regime." Now, what is that? Well, that is the regime, that is the name that the country is called under a group you might know as the Khmer Rouge, which were a violent, horrible communist group in the late 70s. They still were existent into the 90s, but they had controlled the country 1975 to 1979, and they decimated the country. They pulled people out of the cities. They forced them to be farmers, and they killed off a quarter of the population. And they themselves were Cambodians. So they weren't killing another ethnic group. They were killing their own people. And so it was a horrific time. The population, it's estimated about half of the population still suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder because of all that. Even people who weren't alive at that time, because the parents passed things on to the kids. So, I put this here not because it's the only difficulty in the nation, because there's a lot of other things in the timeline that we could go through. But I put it because it's the most known, and it wrecked the society, and they're still dealing with things. But praise God, there has been some progress. So,
all right, if we can go to the next slide. I'll show you what we're doing. Number one, pastoring expats and locals. Okay, so what does that mean? So the Assemblies of God World Mission has ICA churches. That's International Christian Assemblies in not all major, but many major cities around the world. It's for the expatriates, those who have moved into that city for work or retirement, or perhaps trying to escape persecution in their own country. It's for them to come, and the language spoken is English. So we have the great privilege and the great honor to be able to pastor an ICA in Phnom Penh. Number two, you'll see that it says preparing nationals. So we also have the great opportunity to be professors or teachers at the Cambodian Bible Institute. And that's important because there's so many cities in Cambodia that does not have a Christian church whatsoever. So we have the privilege of being able to give the tools to nationals, Cambodians, who feel a call of God on their life, and then they can go out and plant the churches in the nation, and they'll be much more effective than Greg and I could be, because they know the language well, they know the culture well, they know their people well. Then number three, pipelining global workers. Now, this is a dream of ours. It's not something we can do right away, but as we get established there, we want to be able to provide an internship for American students who feel a call of God to missions on their life to come and do an internship program with us. They'll continue their education by doing schooling online, and then they'll go and they'll shadow missionaries in Cambodia for a period of time, maybe 6 months to a year. And then they'll pray about a call of God of, do you want us to give a lifetime to this? Because like Greg mentioned before, we're in our 50s, so we're not going to be there for 50 more years. There's no way. But young people can commit to that if that's what God has for them.
Yeah, and so we're really looking forward to that. This next slide basically says how you can partner with us. Obviously, we know the one on the right that has the QR code. Churches and individuals partner with us financially. And so you know that we need to raise funds for a budget. We have a certain amount of budget, and we can't be cleared to go on the field until we have that. And that's how we live and work over there. But there's something else that's really important, because this can fall through the cracks, and that is prayer. We need people to partner with us in prayer. When we ask you to put that little card on your refrigerator or on a bulletin board, we're not asking you to do that because we just look pretty, right? And so, but we're asking you to look at that and pray for us. Look, I want to hear those stories when we're over there going, hey, was something going on at this time, because God woke me up at 3. And let me tell you something, if something's happening and while we're doing things, you will be woken up in the morning early, because it's 12-hour difference. Okay, I'm just letting you know that. I mean, so I'm expecting to hear some of those things, because why? That encourages us, and I hope that encourages you, that God's using you in the States to help on the mission field. You're not somebody that's just passive. You're a part of it. Okay, so we're excited about that. Let's look at the next thing. And do you want to do this one? Yeah.
All right. It says, do you sense a call to missions? So For many people, a lot of times they may feel an interest towards doing mission work, or they may feel a call but not quite sure what to do with that. And it can kind of be confusing because what's my next steps? Well, you can scan that QR code and it will.
Right now?
Yes. It will go straight to a site where you can fill out information about yourself. And what it does is it gets you in contact with someone at the Assemblies of God World Mission that can start that conversation. You're not signing up to go to the mission field tomorrow. You're not even signing up to go on a mission trip. You're just starting the conversation so that you can talk to someone who knows what it's like to wonder, is God calling me? Is he stirring me to do this? And they can help navigate you down that path. Oh, okay. And then the next slide. Now, this is time sensitive. There's a Missions and Me conference that's going to be happening in Wisconsin. Yes, there it is. Kenosha, Wisconsin. You can also scan that QR code, but if you decide to go, you have to do it by tomorrow. Tomorrow's the deadline. So it's a 3-day event where you can go in person and talk to missionaries as well as leaders in the mission field, and that's another opportunity for that face-to-face conversation.
But we'd be crazy to think that they wouldn't take somebody if they called Tuesday. They would, but don't do it. Don't do it. And don't tell them I said that. But anyway, that's because these things are difficult. These things are difficult to navigate. How do I go on a mission field? If I feel a calling, where do I start? How do I got to talk to somebody. Who do I talk to? Well, you'll be able to talk to our regional director. You'll be able to talk to our area director. You'll be able to talk to missionaries. So it's a great opportunity. And if you don't want to go to Wisconsin, I believe there'll be one in May in Springfield, Missouri. So I'd rather go to Wisconsin. But anyway, because I've been to Springfield so much. All right, let's go to the next one, last one. Just if you've got any questions that we don't cover, you can talk our ear off over here in the corner because we'd love to talk to you about stuff. Ask us any questions. There's no stupid questions. There's no off the rail questions. Just ask us stuff. If we don't know it, we'll tell you we don't know it. So, but we definitely want to share. All right, so let's get into what we're going to talk to you about today, or what I'm going to talk to you about today, and a message I want to leave with you. And here's the thing. I'm going to talk to you about something from an angle of ministering to Buddhists, but this is applicable to you whether you ever deal with someone who's that takes hold of the religion of Buddhism. Okay? It doesn't, and you don't have to go to Southeast Asia for this to be something important. These principles swing over to where you're at right now. And so I hope that I do a decent enough job to show you how that happens in just a couple minutes. So if we can go ahead and let's start there we go. Cool. Next week I have to do this in Spanish. I'm not speaking Spanish, but somebody's going to translate it. But I did have to do Google Translate. I hope it came out right because I have no idea. So anyway, they'll let me know. I can tell you this right now. They will let me know. They will let me know. All right, so we're going to talk about, if you take the gospel and you give it to somebody, you are assuming that they have a foundation on which you can lay what you're talking about. You're assuming some things about people, where you start. I mean, that's just reality. If I was going to talk to somebody about Jesus today, where I start assumes that they have a foundation to be able to receive that they have an understanding, the words I'm going to use, that they know the definitions that I'm going to use, that they know all this. And so where this hits you today here in Knoxville is you have to be very careful of what you assume people know. Because when we start going out and rattling off verses and things to people, sometimes we get the idea that people know what we're talking about. And you go, well, I know what we're talking about. Yeah, but if you start in certain places with certain verses, you have basically left out a huge chunk of the story that they may not understand because they may have no Bible background, no Christian background, no church background. And here's the thing, I would not ever want to assume anything with anybody that has a church background, because a lot of people learn a lot of things wrong here. They've moved forward in Christianity, so to speak, but they really didn't learn the basics. And so they understand some things. I'll tell you something, how you can find out if a person's not a Christian real quick. Ask them if they're good enough to go to heaven. And if they turn around and they say, yeah, I'm pretty good, I think I'm going to make it to heaven, you know they're not a Christian. Right? Because that's not how you get to heaven. You don't get to heaven because you go to church and you're a pretty good person. You get to heaven because of the work that Christ did on the cross and because you've acknowledged that and put faith in that work, right? Okay, so where do we start? We're going to start out this morning. Where do we start if we're going to deal with Buddhists? Buddhists have no background. You can't even assume that Buddhist overseers had ever heard of Jesus. They may have, but you can't assume things, and you have to understand that they have a certain worldview that they've had all of their life. And so we got to ask, what is the starting point? And what I'll just do is I'll just say, go to the next slide. I'll do that. Yeah, cool. So I'm going to tell you right here, John 3:16, going up to a Buddhist person is not the right spot. And you'd go, now, I can understand some people that have been in church thinking, I'm a heretic now, and thinking, well, John 3:16, for God so loved the world, how could that's good truth. Yeah, it is good truth. The problem is you understand it because you have a foundation that's been laid for you to understand what all that means. They don't have it. Yeah. And in fact, the reality is, what we're fixing to break down in just a few minutes is it is going to be misunderstood on every phrase of that is misunderstood potentially by a Buddhist. So let's look at the next slide because this will help you. And I want you to have this mindset in your mind's eye this morning. Think of these pair of glasses as a Buddhist worldview. And then you've got John 3:16, and they're looking at that. Now, there's a few items in that Buddhist worldview that I put. Not everything, but I've put the Noble Eightfold Path. We'll talk about that in a minute. The Four Noble Truths, we'll talk about that. These are tenets of faith for them. Samsara, that's a cycle of existence in Buddhism, and nirvana. So they're looking at all these things. And we could also, there's a couple other words that would be prominent we could put on there as well. But you know what? I use the free version of AI. And so you can only tell it so many times a month to correct something. And I'm like, I'm not going to pay for that. And I've already used 3 AIs. So, okay. So anyway, so that's my nice little AI version. So just think of this. When you think of what we're going to go do, not only are we going to minister to people who are expats and folks, but we're also going to be in the midst of a Buddhist culture, the context right there, and we're going to be rubbing shoulders with Buddhist people every day. Most of the people are going to be Buddhist, and they're going to have this worldview. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So we're going to go through the different phrases here. We'll start out. The first thing is we'll take the first two words for God. Now, let me say this because I got to give credit where credit's due. This is not on our table because I gave this book to somebody last week, so we'll have to get another book. But I would encourage you, there's a book called Change the Map by a missionary to Thailand named Mark Doreen. And so a lot of this I get from Mark Doreen. He's been over in Thailand for years. And so I want to give him credit. So I'll give some quotes out of his book here. So, for God, Mark Doreen in his book explains that Buddhist teaching suggests that if God exists, he is evil. Okay? Now, let me first of all say a couple things. Buddhism does not have a concept of God as far as an eternal creator God. They have gods, but they're within reality. They're on a higher level. You could become a god, or you could become a deer. You just don't need to become a deer in the fall in Knoxville, right? Okay. Anyway, so that's just kind of a side note. Just let you know. But you could become that. You could in a next life, right? Okay. That's in this cycle that we'll talk about in just a few minutes. And so, so their gods are not like our God. And so they're, okay. So the first thing they're not, I want to trying to think of where I was going on this next thing. So God's not eternal. He's not always been in their mindset. Our God is eternal. So they don't have that mindset of an eternal God. Secondly, they don't have the mindset of a good God, because if he does exist and he's the creator of all this, then he's the source of the problem. Now, let's go through what's called the Four Noble Truths. These are major tenets in Buddhism, so let's look at it. I'll just kind of read through it. Number one is life is suffering. Now, let me expand on that real quick. How many knows that there's suffering in life, right? Okay, so Buddhists would say life is suffering. We see all these bad things that are happening around us, and in their mindset, it has always been that way. That's just how it's always been. Okay? Secondly, suffering is caused by desires. So if you have desires, you want certain things to happen in your life, you've got these expectations, they are not met, and that is the source of your pain and your suffering. Okay? Number three, suffering is extinguished by extinguishing desires. So since desire is the cause of suffering, we need some way to extinguish it. So this kind of makes sense, right? And so the way to extinguish it is to follow what's called the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, if you remember on that little set of glasses there, it looked like a ship's wheel, a captain's wheel. Well, if you go in a Buddhist temple, you'll see that. And basically, that is just at each point, it's a different behavior, which is preceded by the word right. And so there's different right behaviors. And if you'll do these right behaviors, you will eventually be able to achieve enlightenment, which is the extinguishing of desire and is the attaining of nirvana. Now, what is nirvana? I'm glad you asked. It's not heaven. No, it's really not anything, because nirvana is nothingness. It's non-existence. They're not trying to get to heaven. They're trying to get out of existence. They're trying to get out of suffering. They're not trying to, and we'll look at that a little bit more. But so if you look at the Four Noble Truths, you see how the first couple words, for God, is problematic because there is suffering everywhere. And so this is a God that can't be trusted if he exists. Okay, let's go to the next one. So love the world. Well, Mark Doreen writes this. He says, believe it or not, love is ultimately a bad thing in Buddhism. Now, I'm not saying that this is consistently practiced. I mean, people who are Buddhists love their kids, but it nonetheless is a part of the worldview. That it's one thing that Buddhists would look at as being a defect or a weakness in Christianity, because we put emphasis on love. Well, they're trying to extinguish love, right? And why is that? Think back at those Four Noble Truths. Why are they trying to extinguish love? Love is what? Desire. Yeah. So if you can go to the next one, I've got it. Yeah. It's a desire. So love is a problem because this, I love this person. This person doesn't love me back. I love this person. They die. it causes me suffering. Okay, so they got a problem with so love the world. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, that he gave his only son. Well, look, if we flesh this out, we know that if we go to other verses and passages that we can flesh it out, and we know that this is talking about Christ coming down and eventually giving his life, being on a cross, being crucified, being treated like a criminal, being treated shamefully. It's not an honorable position to be in by no stretch of the imagination. So the crucifixion scene can be a stumbling block to Buddhists if it's not explained carefully. We're sitting here going, the crucifixion is the most loving thing. God demonstrated his love for us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us, and Christ dying for us was on a cross. And it was a cruel cross, but it was an act of love. And now, why is this a problem for Buddhists? Why would them seeing somebody treated shamefully, treated like a criminal, cruel pain, be a problem for Buddhists? And I want to think about this. There is something in Buddhism that starts with a K. Do what? Karma. Yeah, go to the next one. What's wrong with that is karma. Now, let me kind of give you a little American version of karma. Okay, I went to see my son. We went to see my son graduate in Kentucky. Anybody been up in the Lexington area? It's kind of like all horse farms. It's just a gorgeous area. And he went to the Asbury Theological Seminary. It's across the street from Asbury University, where 2 or 3 years ago they had revivals and stuff like that happen in there for a while, and lots of people came in. And I can understand why they eventually wanted them out of the city, because the only thing in the city is this seminary and then the university and then the little things around it. So I can imagine it must have been nuts trying to get in and get out of there. But anyway, we went to see him graduate from the seminary. And I'm driving down the road one night, and it's dark, and I'm not going to go super fast. And all of a sudden, this guy, evidently a local, got behind me and was trying to, you know how people get behind you, tailgate, you're going too slow and stuff like that. Well, here's the deal. I can't go any faster on this road. I don't know it. And there's another problem. When you tailgate me, I don't start going faster. I actually go slower. Yes. Yeah. And it's just like, oh my goodness, my foot's getting lighter. And well, this guy does not. And of course, my wife's always like, what if they have a gun? What if they have a gun? You know, it's always, I don't know if any other men in here have that. Oh, don't do that. If they have a gun, they'll kill us or whatever. So she's all, and I'm just like, look, he's not going to run me off the road. He goes around me. And as he's going around, he honks at me and he gives me a signal. And so we're going down the road, and you know exactly what signal he gave me, right? I was telling Pastor and I was telling Rick the other night that I was at a church, and I was telling this story, and the sign language lady didn't know how do you sign language flipping somebody off, so she flipped the camera off. I was going, great, but I said, but send me that video. So anyway, that'd make a great thing to put on Facebook, but she'd probably kill me. But anyway, so imagine this. Imagine if I got down the road and this speed demon and this guy that flipped me off had hit a tree, and he was outside of his car and his radiator's steaming, and he's sitting there all mad. And I drive by, and the Americans would say, karma. Yeah. What goes around comes around, got what he deserved, all this kind of thing. And so it's kind of like, well, you did this, so you got that. That is not karma in Buddhism. It's not somebody hit me and then they get smashed later. It's past deeds done in a previous life that affects this life. In other words, they believe in a cycle of lives. And so if you're struggling with something in this life, you must have done something bad in the last. You have somebody that gets killed on a moped or something in Thailand or whatever, you might have the person thinking, or actually, let's say in Cambodia, you might have that person's dead right there. They might have been a Khmer Rouge officer in the last life. That person, so the mindset is there. Whether it's consistently thought on, it still is part of a background. And we have worldview stuff that even comes from just being Westerners, not just our Christianity, but things that cause us, that sometimes we think certain things because we're here, we live here. And we have certain mindsets because we live here. Okay, let's go to the next one. So it says that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. What do you think's wrong with this? I want you to specifically look at the last thing. Think about it. A Buddhist is reading this. But what is it? Yeah.
Well, their whole goal is to get out of the life cycle.
Yeah.
So that the idea of eternal life is like helping them.
There you go. Man, you got it. Yes. Eternal life. So eternal suffering. I don't want it. Thank you. You know, it's kind of like we're all going, I get to live forever. And they're like going, I don't want to live forever. I want to get out of this cycle. And what's wrong with it is that word earlier, samsara, that I was talking about, and that is the cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth. Birth, life, death, rebirth. And it's over and over. Look, the average person that's living in Cambodia that is a Buddhist is not going to sit down and think that they're going to achieve enlightenment at the end of in their lifetime. The end of this cycle. They're just hoping that the next life is better than this one. Because they're not thinking that where they're at that level that they can ever achieve that. They just want to get a leg up in the next life, right? Do a little bit better in the next life. And so that affects how they do things. That affects how when they go to temples or go to certain do certain rites or whatever to attain merit or to give things to a monk or whatever, or to be a monk for a time period. Why? To just put more on this side of the scale than the bad stuff on the other side of the scale so that they can have a better life. Okay? All right, so let's go to the next thing, next slide. So here's the thing. You could see just coming up to somebody, give them a tract, John 3:16, and do you want to go to heaven, isn't going to cut it. Because what we want in America is we want people getting saved. We can put them down on our annual church ministries report that we got so many people saved, right? Look, now I don't know what the figures are in Cambodia where we're going, but I know that a former general superintendent of the Assemblies of God in Thailand said on average it takes 7 years for a Buddhist to come to Christ. So if you're trying to talk about, hey, anybody want to come to Christ right now? And here's the thing I also want you to think about. We think about evangelism in short order. They think about, or evangelism among folks that are Buddhists is going to be a mix of discipleship and evangelism. You're discipling them before they're even saved because they're having to learn stuff. I wonder if we should be discipling people as we're evangelizing. I mean, why do we split everything up, right? We are called to make disciples. So, all right, so what's the right starting point? What's the right starting point when we go to Cambodia and we sit down with a Buddhist? But what's the right starting point too? I'm going to say, this is going to go over into your life here, whether you're talking to a Buddhist or not. Where should you start with somebody instead of making assumptions? Let's look at the next. We need to go back to the beginning. Folks, before you get to the Gospels, there's 39 other books. you know? There's 39 other books. All that Old Testament material. Well, that's all that Old Testament material. I don't want that kind, I don't want to get into that kind of stuff. We're New Covenant people. New Covenant people, the New Covenant is built on the Old Testament. It's built on all the stuff. Why in the world would you think the apostles would turn around and dozens and dozens and dozens of times quote from the Old Testament? It's the New Testament is the fulfillment of those things. If we don't understand the narrative of the Old, we don't even know how the New Testament, what in the world the New Testament's fulfilling. I mean, we can say, oh yeah, well, I've gone to church all my life and I know I'm supposed to believe in Jesus and all of this kind of stuff, but don't we want people, don't we want ourselves to know the narrative, to know how all of this makes sense, to know why we're not just a different religion, different belief system, but we actually has a sensible worldview, that we understand a story, because you got to understand there's 4,000 years packed in that book of history. Okay, so you got to go back to the beginning. So I'll show you how this pretty quick. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, I got to watch my wife. Are you doing okay? All right. She lets me know if you need to wrap it up. And she has certain looks, and sometimes I don't understand them. But anyway, I will wrap it up. I'm watching the clock. I'm not going, you didn't need to bring fish and loaves today, okay? So Genesis 1:1, God is eternal. Look, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God created everything. He's not just a divine figure that exists in reality. He created reality. Now, this isn't the only verse that you can use, but I'm just telling you, you need to go back to stuff that comes from the beginning. It comes from the beginning of the narrative. And then you could show them other scriptures that have to do with this. But we need to, first of all, okay, God's eternal. So second, because that's a novel idea in Buddhism, Genesis 1-2, you need to show him not only is he eternal, but he's not evil because he is good. And he created everything good. Life has not always been suffering. It was created good. In fact, if you look down and you look in Genesis chapter 1, you find that God says, this thing that is good. This thing is good. And then he says, this is very good. Then you get in Genesis chapter 2 and you find out what's all in the garden, and they have all kinds of trees. And you really think about it, if you step back and you think everything God had made, and he told them, just don't eat from that tree. Okay, just imagine, it's like us picking a tree out here, don't eat from that tree right there, fruit tree out there, and then realizing you have the entire world. And God is withholding something? Are you crazy? Isn't it his right to say, hey, this is mine right here? They had the entire world, but yet they said, well, that's the exact thing I want. Is that one right there that you said not for me not to get near or not to eat from? One thing at the end of Genesis 2 that I think is interesting is it said that man and woman were naked and unashamed. Now, if that was the case, which it was, that is a different world than what we live in. Now, I remember talking to a guy who was an atheist at somebody's house that they asked me to come over and talk to this guy. And so we had this conversation. And I said, one of the things with somebody that's an atheist, it's like, where do clothes come from? You don't see monkeys wearing clothes. You don't go up and you don't see them trying to go hide and they're going across the cage or whatever. They're just walking out there just like, the only animals that you see clothes on are dogs, and that's little sweaters that you people put on, right? But I never let my dog out and her going, can anybody see me or something like that? And trying to sneak around. They're not worried about that. Because why? It's not animals don't care. But something happened to humanity that changed things. And the only people that I know that are okay with being naked and they're not afraid just being out in the open are like 2-year-olds that are running from you with their diaper, right? And they're like, and they think it's funny. The little kids will go, man, they think it's so funny because they see the horror on everybody's face. Because stop, come on. But you know what? Those same kids, have you ever seen a kid that as they're growing, they're just like, you know, they just come out there and they'll say whatever they want to. And they, you know, they're not afraid of anything. But at a certain age, that snaps. And then next thing you know, they're just like, don't look at me. Don't point me out. But it was just a year or two before, they were just like, hey, you know, coming out. And when they were a lot younger, they didn't mind running out naked. Well, we don't live in a world where everybody's okay with just walking around, going to BNA airport or going to the zoo or whatever and walking around like that. Now, I asked that atheist, I said, so you would you're okay walking down the terminal in BNA in Nashville without any clothes on? Yeah, I'm good. I said, you're not like that. No, there's no chance you're gonna do that. Not just because you get arrested, but you would be afraid. Okay, don't be stupid. You know, talk rational. All right. So it was a very different world. Well, Genesis, let's go to the next one. Genesis chapter 3, it gives us the origin of suffering. It gives us when everything changed, when there became problems. And why? Because man sinned. Man went to that tree and took the fruit and ate it. And then we notice in Genesis chapter 3 that we can just, as we read it, we can see it in our mind's eye, their countenance change. They're afraid now. They're going and getting clothed. They're hiding from God. When he comes walking through the garden, they're like, oh, crud. Everything changes. And we can read through that and you can see all the consequences and all of the punishments that come down the road. And I don't know about you, but it wasn't too long ago I found a thistle in my yard. I didn't even try to plant it. I mean, I thought our backyard is now a cow pasture. And I didn't seed that. But these things just naturally grow now. People die. We have sickness. We have problems. And it's Genesis 3. But here's the beautiful thing, because this shows them that, hey, there wasn't suffering before. Suffering had a start. So this is already a novel thing to their worldview that thinks suffering was always. It had a beginning. But here's the thing. God doesn't leave us at the beginning. And I've got two more things I want to show you and we'll be done. Genesis 3:15 is known as the proto-evangelium, which is the first gospel. It's not all fleshed out. It doesn't explain everything, but it does say a seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent. And you sit down and you go, you know what? It's going to take all of the rest of the Bible to flesh that out and say exactly what that means. But they knew somebody was coming, and they knew he was going to reverse this curse because he was going to crush the one that had brought them into it. That is hope. Because you could turn around and say, folks, we can then flip to the end of the Bible and say, look, this is how it's going to turn out. You know what? That's the tree of life they were banned in Genesis 3 at the end of Revelation. There's access to it. There's no suffering. There's no pain. That we will live forever will be, there's no sin, there's no wickedness. All the things that we see as evil, they're not going to be part of the new earth. That is the hope we have. So not only was it was not always suffering, it will not always be suffering. And that is the story that God has told us. Let's look at the last thing, and I don't have time to really go into this, but I think it is important because in Buddhism, animals and people are on the same level. Okay? And so that's problematic for animal sacrifice if you start, because at Genesis 3:21, you have God making clothes out of animal skins, right? And I would argue that God made the first sacrifice. And then right after that, you end up having Abel making an animal sacrifice. And then you get all the way to Solomon making thousands of sacrifices. And so for a Buddhist, this would be problematic, because they would sit down and go, you're murdering animals. How could this is evil or whatever? But then that's when you have to go, no, in the biblical narrative, man is the creature that's made in the image of God. It's never said about animals. Also, in Genesis 9, animals are put on the table. Men are never allowed to be cannibals. So if you look at Genesis 9, you go from a world that's vegetarian to a world that is allowed, because God sanctions it, to eat meat. So animals are not on the same level as people. And that's so important. So once you get past that animal sacrifice, then you can explain how animal sacrifice, though it never took away people's sins, it was a suitable substitute that illustrated something that was coming. And then when you get to John, and you see John the Baptist looking up, and he says, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. Then all of a sudden you go, Lamb, sins taken away. They knew exactly what that meant. Now, I don't think anybody around him knew exactly what that meant for Jesus, but they understood lambs, and they understood sin being taken away, or sin being atoned for. And so that statement makes sense. And so you can go through the Bible and explain sacrifice and stuff like that. But do you see that there's obstacles? Now, Mark Doreen, he sat down with a Buddhist group of folks that asked him to tell them how to be a Christian. He sat down with them for 2 years every Thursday night. Here's the thing. It takes time to sit with people. It takes time to explain things. If we're in a hurry to get that, yeah, I believe in Jesus, I want to go to heaven. But if we're willing to sit down with people in Knoxville, Tennessee, and take time explaining to them the meta-narrative of Scripture so that the gospel makes sense. If you can go to the last one. The gospel makes sense when we begin at the right starting point. And I would say you begin at the right starting point at the beginning of the story. Don't skip chapters in the sense of, information. But I'm not saying that you have to read through the book of Leviticus for them. So don't take that. Well, he said not to skip chapters, so we're in Numbers now. So let's go. No, I'm saying take the narrative, the full narrative, to explain to them why you have the gospel, why when Jesus showed up, why he had to die on the cross, what he was saving us from. Because if you just say you need to be saved from what? So I hope that made sense this morning. I hope you will take that into your life and think about, when I am expressing the gospel to somebody, does this person understand what I'm talking about? Because that's the main thing. It's not names on a roll here that we want to get. It's people saved. Pastor?
Amen.